Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lit in Space podcast. This is Alessio, partner and CTO at Decibel, and I'm joined by Swix, founder of Small AI.
Hello, hello. Today it's an unusual podcast because we're in a remote studio, but we're joined not by researcher or founder, but a journalist, our first ever journalist on the podcast. Welcome, Steph Palazzolo from The Information.
Hi, yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Steph, I don't know if you remember, but actually, I think the first time I came across your work, I actually did a parody of it for the Sam Altman blip back in 2023, where I put sort of Adam Newman as the prospective new CEO of OpenAI. That was pretty fun.
No, that was super funny. I remember just seeing a bunch of parodies of that over the next couple of days. It was just every single insane tech personality you could think of. So yeah, that was a very insane week, but that meme definitely stands out to me. I definitely remember that.
I was like, who's the funniest possible CEO I could install in OpenAI? I know, the WeWork guy. But yeah, perhaps you could introduce yourself to our audience. How'd you get started in reporting and basically covering AI for The Information?
Totally, yeah. So my name's Stephanie Palazzolo. I cover AI here at The Information. And so that means working on just stories about the space, whether that's about investments or big tech companies, broader trends. But I also help to run our daily AI newsletter, AI Agenda. So that comes out 4 times a week, and we get more into the weeds and talk a bit more about what we're seeing with developers and researchers. And so I've been here for about 2 years. Before that, I was covering the same beat at Business Insider. And then before that, actually, I have a bit of a weird background because I used to work in tech investment banking. So I was in finance, doing the IPO and any craziness during COVID. And yeah, I really enjoyed working with tech companies and startups, but I was I don't know if finance is my passion, which I don't think is the craziest thing for anyone to say. But I just had always loved journalism growing up. And I was what better time of my life to try something kind of out there and try to combine tech and writing and see how it goes. And then, yeah, I mean, everything's worked out. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, in remarkable fashion. Yeah, Leslie, you wanted to say something.
What was your first story? How did you get started covering?
Yeah, I'm sure that my first story was probably just some silly write-up of a report or something. But I think the first story I remember doing about AI was during summer 2022. I live in New York, so every couple months I go visit SF. And specifically on that trip I went, and everyone was like, oh my God, let me show you this funny app called Dolly. And we're going to make pictures of cats floating in space. And it's so funny and cool. And then it just started to come up in so many conversations that I was this is a fun little trend. Maybe I should write something about it. And so then I ended up doing a piece that was why VCs are obsessed with this new area called generative AI. And then obviously 3 months later, it was blown up and ChatGPT was released. But yeah, I remember that was my first generative AI specific piece that I did, which was honestly kind of just an accident. I just happened to talk with a bunch of VCs who are excited about it. But yeah, and then ever since then, I've been covering the space. So.
Yeah, we're slowly being pulled into the orbit. Before we go deeper into your work and how you cover AI, I just wanted to discuss The Information more broadly. Actually, remember when Jessica Lessin left I think Wall Street Journal and joined and started The Information. I was basically following her since then. And basically I'm just kind of I'm also a finance refugee, by the way. I used to be in a hedge fund as well.
Nice. Yeah, nice. All recovering ex-finance people. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we have an interesting perspective in terms of covering these startups as effectively stocks. I view myself secretly as all the write-ups that I do are industry sector reports that analysts might cover, except they're not publicly listed companies. So I'm curious, how is The Information organized today? AI has taken over everything. So is everyone covering AI? How do you sort of split the work and all that?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I feel people always ask me oh my God, AI is so crazy. How do you cover it by yourself? And I'm we actually have 10 different, 10 different writers who are basically covering different areas of AI. So I get a lot of help. But yeah, specifically, so The Information, we've been around for over a decade. We are kind of a tech and finance media publication. Specifically, I would think of us as yeah, kind of going above and beyond to get you behind the scenes and to get the scoops around what's happening at some of the most important, tech media finance companies today. And so specifically, like for me covering AI, I'm kind of part of like what you might think of as like the enterprise tech team. And so we have reporters who are covering like the major tech companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft. But then we also have reporters that are covering like cloud more broadly, or chips, or like crypto. And so we have like a mix of reporters that cover specific companies, but then also reporters that are covering like larger beats, like AI, for instance. And then of course we have another part of the business that covers like finance and deals and retail companies and consumer companies. And so, yeah, basically like we just cover anything and everything around tech and finance. So it's quite a wide array of things. And we're always like looping in like, anytime I do a story around like OpenAI's need for compute, like we're always looping in like my colleagues, Anissa, who covers cloud, or Chenner, who covers chips, and our reporters who cover like the big cloud providers. So it's very collaborative.
Yeah, I'm sure it has to be. Okay, let's see what you do, right? You write the AI agenda. You show on you also appear on TITV, which is like your new sort of TV channel. You report scoops like once to twice a week. I feel like. How do you like? Is it how do you do it? What else is part of your role?
Yeah. No, it's kind of funny because like, I think for me, because I came from finance, I never had done a journalism job before that. Like, I still feel like I'm pretty new to the field and learning about how things work. And whenever I first joined, I think you kind of just assume that as a writer, like most of your time would be spent writing, but that's actually probably like 20% of my day. I think like the vast majority of my day is spent maybe like, I don't know if VCs would like this analogy, but maybe in some ways like how a VC might, where you're constantly reaching out to founders and interesting startups and asking people like, oh, if I want to learn about XYZ topic, who should I be talking to next? So like the vast majority of my day is actually on calls with founders and researchers and investors, and basically just like begging them and being like, hey, like what's like the hottest gossip that you guys know, or like what's like the coolest new trend in AI that you've seen. And so I think it's just constantly trying to stay ahead of what's in the mainstream news about AI. And I think for me, two things that I really care about are, maybe you relate to this, like previously working in finance, is thinking about like the business models and the financials of these companies. So we've done a bunch of pieces, or like I've done a bunch of pieces around like inference providers and like their gross margins and business models, which initially might sound very boring, but I think is actually really interesting. And then also like on the tech side of things, like I think we're always trying to understand what is the trajectory of AI development, like what are the obstacles, and how are the big AI labs trying to get, past those challenges.
Yeah, we can get right into it. I was actually going to start with the labs first, but I mean, since inference is coming up, today's big news is Modal is raising at $1 billion. I saw the other day Fireworks is raising at $4 billion. Things seem on fire everywhere, but like, what's going on in the inference market?
Yeah.
What's the high level take for people kind of out of the loop?
Yes, the high level take. So yes, basically, I'm sure a lot of your listeners already know this, but these inference providers are companies that are, helping developers like run and train and customize open source AI models more easily than they would be able to otherwise. And so, yeah, there's just so many companies in the space. You mentioned some of them: Fireworks, Modal, there's Together, there's Base 10. There's just a ton of these companies in the space. And so Fal's another one. Yes. And so, yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of these companies have gotten so much funding, but there's still a lot of like skepticism around this space and like whether these companies are actually going to end up being like, like billions or trillions of dollars, like $1 trillion company. So I think a lot of people like think basically just call these companies like GPU resellers. So they're just like, oh, all you're doing is just being like a cloud, basically, helping developers get access to chips to run models on. So you're like a knockoff Amazon, or like a knockoff like Azure or Google Cloud, which is like a bit derogatory. But I think that's kind of like what the con argument, that's like the argument against them. Because also, unlike software companies, they have to like spend so much money getting the, getting those chips, and they have to keep a bunch of them like unused at any given time in case there's a sudden spike in demand. I think like the argument for them that I've heard from investors is just like, yeah, like as, AI apps become more popular, like we're going to see the amount of money going into AI inference to just like explode and go way beyond the amount of money and compute being spent on training. So we should have a bunch of companies that are available here to like help developers build these apps and like access models really quickly. And I think the space is also, there are some companies in the space that are starting to like think about maybe having their own data centers and moving more into like the data center, like truly cloud provider world versus just like, I'm going to use chips from existing clouds. So yeah, I don't know. It's like a very interesting space. And I think it's just an example of like a new category of startups that really didn't exist like even 2 or 3 years ago that are just popping up because of like the demand for AI models.
Yeah, and I think just to point to another example that we didn't mention, but CoreWeave, technically a GPU reseller, and a public company. So like, definitely a lot of room.
I would be curious for Alessio, like what you think about this space, like from kind of like the VC side of things. Give us your hottest take.
I think on the VC side initially, I think everybody, well, not everybody, obviously, because some people invested in it. I think the timeline of when the existing companies were going to catch up, I think people overestimated how quickly they would do it. I think the same thing happened in coding, which I think a lot of the sentiment initially was like, well, we had Cursor on our pockets like 2.5 years ago.
Mhm.
And the sentiment is like, oh, it's great. OpenAI is using it, but like GitHub cannot possibly let them run away with it, And I think with inference, it was like similar, where it's like, hey, obviously these tools are growing quickly because, the main providers don't really offer these and blah, blah, blah. And then there was kind of like this question of, is there like a AI air pocket in pre-training where you kind of have all these like commitments on the GPU and the hyperscalers, but then they're going to go back to inference. And so it's kind of going to bring the price so down. Can you really build a company in the space? But I think Fal especially has done amazing because media is still very open source driven when it comes to image and video generation. In a way, the language is not as much. So I think they've been doing great and, very happy for their announcement today. But yeah, we haven't done any, but also like we have a smaller fund. And I think all of these inference things are like big money investments. Like you cannot do a $5 million round in like an inference company. You kind of need a good chunk of capital to run the business. So obviously, likely the VC model has evolved now to have these mega funds that are able to support this like 100 million, like, Fal raised 125 million today. You need a lot of money to run these things, and together raise a huge amount of money. Like it's not easy to survive. Yep. And I'm curious to see where they land in a few years.
Yeah, no, it's crazy to just see like casually like $100 million plus round of being like, oh yeah, that's totally normal for an early stage AI startup. So yeah,
2 billion seed rounds is normal now. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah, the small seed round of $2 billion.
We'll get to the labs, but I just want to stay focused on the infra side. We did have a chat with Eric from Moldol. And, we talked a little bit about how it's almost a little bit like a bank, right? Like it's basically what you're doing is maturity transformation of long-term contracts into shorter term, usage of things. And, I think whoever is the best technologist and the best developer experience is going to win there in terms of serving out these GPUs for providers. And the other thing I always think about from a finance point of view that maybe people don't think about that closely, but obviously push back if you disagree, is that it's basically a proxy for the gap between open models and closed models. Because if the open models do better, sort of the API hosts, the inference hosts do better. And if open models fall behind, then they do worse. So far, DeepSeek, obviously like still one of the biggest news of the year, what was a big gift to the inference providers, and the sort of relative decline of Llama and the disappointment Llama 4 was, a problem for them. So yeah, that'll be how I characterize it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very fair point. I do think there's probably a lot of usage of the inference providers for not necessarily to get state of the art models, but because like there's so many tasks that you'd want to use like a cheaper model for. Or I know even whenever like the DeepSeek R1 model first came out, one of the major like startups in the space was like, 75% of the usage that we see for R1 is people trying to distill it into like whatever specific use case they want, which I think is like really interesting, because I don't know if I would think that like distillation is like a Like, I don't know if I would say it's a good thing that 75% of your usage is distillation, but I mean, you can't deny that, like, whenever you see models come out like DeepSeek, like that is a huge draw to these inference startups for sure.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it. And also partially because DeepSeek was huge, right? There's a lot of these like Kimi K2 and what's the other one, GLM 4.5 right now. All of these are hundreds of billions of parameters, like very costly to serve for like sort of day-to-day use. So you have to distill it somehow.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
true.
Yeah. I think the other more recent news, I'm just going to go in sort of like reverse chron order, but also like feel free to just do tangents on themes and stuff. The next one is Meta. This is a fun one. I was super happy to reach out to you because you not only like breaking news and scooping things, you actually put opinions into your newsletter, which is, I think, very brave as a journalist,
Thank
right?
you.
Because like sometimes you have to like meet these people face to face, and you're out here saying Meta should not have super intelligence. What's up with that?
That's true. Yeah. No, whenever we published that with that headline, I was like, God, I feel like I'm going to get some angry comments with this. No, but like, I don't know. I think there's like two ways to look at this. Like, I think one way is like, obviously, if we're going to reach super intelligence, like, I think every big tech company with the resources, like, does not want to miss out on that. So, like, it makes sense. Like, Meta's like, if super intelligence is a future, like, I want to be part of that and I want to be part of like that development. But I think just if you take a look at like how Meta actually makes money today, right? It's through like social media apps and ads and these things that have been around for quite a while. Oh yes, there's my lovely piece.
I'm providing visual aid for people, and also
Thank
people
you.
can Google it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. But like if you think about it, a lot of things like ads, like you don't need super intelligence. So whenever you think about all the investment that Meta is putting into AI today, which is great and great for a lot of open source developers, like maybe what's actually good for their P&L and their finances is to not focus so much on building these like insane, huge state of the art models, which they've obviously struggled with more recently, but it's to take things that are, 70, 80, like 90% as good as the best stuff out there and figure out how to use it in its apps. Like, I think that's like a problem I've seen from like Meta and a lot of other companies where it's like the models are getting better. That's great. But it's like, if I'm going on Instagram and like the only AI stuff I see is like, oh, do I want to talk to like an AI version of like the Hawk Tuah girl or like I'm like, who's using this? Like, like this cannot be like where consumer AI ends up, right? Like that's just so depressing. And like, I don't know who's using this stuff. So I'm like, I feel like we've seen progress in models and even for Meta, like maybe as we saw with Llama 4, even the progress wasn't like amazing, it seems, but like we've seen even less progress like in the actual products and like innovation there. So I'm like, I love it if Meta's, came up with some really cool like AI apps that I couldn't even think of versus just like more and more models. But yeah, I'm curious like what you guys think. And I think people have very strong opinions on whether Mark is making the right moves with like some of these big hires and the super intelligence labs and all this craziness going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to know what to think. Obviously, so we're recording this the day after Facebook had their earnings report, and Mark put this like personal letter, which was very inspired by Nat Friedman on personalized superintelligence. I host the AI Engineers Summit in World's Fair, and at the summit in February, Sumit from Meta was also talking about some personal intelligence, which I think like it's of a kind. Like I think that part of that group in that part of Facebook really believes in that agenda. We're hoping to talk to Mark for the podcast, so we'll ask him directly. A lot of people think that it's basically he just wants to be the dominant player in every platform. So like, if VR is a thing, fine, we'll do VR. If crypto is a thing, fine, we'll have a crypto play. And like this is the AI play, but obviously I think he's going after this bigger than basically everything else he's ever done, which is his right as a young founder still in control of his company. But like it's also very bold and it's very inspiring. I mean, we haven't shipped anything yet, so we don't know what it's going to look like. But I think it makes sense. I don't know about business model, but like he was happy to bleed like $20 billion a year on VR, so like why not?
They
Yeah.
got glasses. They just put AI in the glasses, and it's fine. We're all gonna wear glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even like reading the kind of letter he put out about personal superintelligence. And like hearing the way he talks about superintelligence is very interesting in contrast with like, like Anthropic, OpenAI, these other players that are like, we want to solve like the world's most dangerous like diseases and, solve all these like huge problems we have in science. And then, yeah, it's interesting. I think Meta has really just doubled down on this idea of like, okay, like that's cool and all, but just like, how about the everyday person? Like, we want to help them too, which I think is good. I think it's good that they're not trying to just do what the other labs are doing, but I feel like I still have to see how the personal superintelligence, like marketing and angle is going to play out with like consumers and stuff.
Totally. Well, the other big part of MSL, which obviously everyone's very excited about, is the pay packages that people are getting. You guys have been reporting very diligently on that. This is also like very breaking news. I'm glad that we're doing this today rather than like maybe last week, because I get to update things, right? And we get some fresh perspectives. Meta spokesperson said, push back on the sort of $1 billion offers that have been rumored, right? So like we're past the 100 million mark right now. We're at $1 billion. And it seems like he deleted this tweet, but basically he sort of pushed back on the sort of pay packages. But like, how do you know when you're being told the truth, right? You have a lot of people leaking you information. There are a lot of people accusing Sam Altman of throwing out numbers in order to play the media. I don't know how true that is. It could be true. It could not be. I just don't know. Like, how do you know when you're being played?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough. Yeah, it's something that I think every journalist has to struggle with and deal with. I think first is thinking about the incentives of the person that you're talking to. So obviously, if I'm talking to a PR person at OpenAI or Anthropic or one of the big labs, like they're obviously going to be pushing a certain narrative that's like probably positive about their company and maybe not so positive about other companies. But even like some of the researchers and stuff, like they might have very strong opinions about like the safety culture at Anthropic or like, again, like Mark's strategy at Meta. So like everyone like has biases and they want to like make themselves and their companies like look good. So I think you just first have to keep that in mind. So I think like pretty much anything we get a tip like this where it's like a huge number that makes a certain company look good and another company not look so good, we wouldn't report that unless we had like multiple sources and we would know like who did that offer go to? If it's over multiple years, how much of that is like cash? How much of that is stock? Is it over like 2 years? Is it over 4 years? Right? There's a lot of ways to like manipulate a number like 1 billion and make it seem like way more crazy or like way less crazy than what it actually is. So I think it's very tough because like there's crazy numbers like that getting thrown around. But like, I think as journalists, we do have responsibility to get into the details and kind of question a little bit more like, okay, why is this person telling me this? And like, is it actually helpful for me to write this number? Or is there actually like X, Y, Z things that I also would need for this to be like a story that tells the full truth? So yeah, I think the reporting on some of these comp numbers has been a little tough because I think at this point, anyone's just throwing out any like hundreds of millions of dollars number or $1 billion offer number. And everyone's like, okay, like that sounds reasonable. So like, yeah, I think some of these numbers, like, I think journalists should include more details on like exactly how these offers are structured that could make them look better or worse.
Yeah, like I have Dylan Patel pushing back on even the $100 million signing bonuses that I think you guys have reported. Like I don't know what the fact. I mean, unless you've seen the actual offer, like it's really hard, like firsthand to actually know what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think like there are situations where like Sam Altman says on a podcast, like, yeah, like Mark's given $100 million offers to our researchers. And and it's like, that's immediately a headline because of like how important Sam Altman is. But like, it doesn't really go through the same like scrutiny as just a normal news story from like a publication. So I think a lot of CEOs are very smart about this and they like know how to throw out stuff and immediately it catches on with the news.
Yeah, because like then that opens for counter narratives. It's just to me, it's fascinating how CEOs sort of kind of use the media as a tool to play games with other CEOs. Obviously, and like we're part of it. Like so, it's a very meta thing. But like like recently, I think this week also there's this story about like how multiple of these offers have gone to Thinking Machines people, and all of them have rejected it or whatever, right? And definitely that's a planted story from Thinking Machines. I don't know how else to say it. They just want to look good.
I mean, yeah, that story definitely makes Thinking Machines Lab like look good for sure.
Okay, cool. Before we move on from Meta, I just want to leave the door open. Any other themes that you're watching on the Meta side?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely covered a lot of the really interesting ones. One theme that I think like Mark has even kind of touched on recently is whether they'll continue open sourcing models, whether they're going to start closed sourcing stuff, and like what does that mean for its business model? Because obviously, like right now, Meta doesn't make money from an API the way that like OpenAI and Anthropic does. But if they start closed sourcing models, maybe that might change, or that could change kind of the shape of the way that they think about how to make money from this. And so, yeah, I think that's very interesting. And I don't know, I think for me as a consumer, like I'm always really interested in like consumer AI because I feel like there's not really as much coverage on it as I would like. And like I use a lot of AI stuff, but nothing that's like truly kind of like, transformed my like non-work related life. So I'm very curious like what Meta will come out with consumer AI.
And if there's any lab that will do it, it's them and OpenAI, I guess. Yeah, we did a podcast. We also had our first VCs on the podcast, Justine and Olivia Moore, who cover consumer AI, and that just seems like a fun job. They scroll TikTok for a living. That's what they do.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I also scroll TikTok for a living, so I wish I could get paid money for that, but no, but it's a very tough job. Honestly, I think investing in consumer AI is like in some ways way trickier than investing in enterprise AI. So props to them.
Yeah, I've come around. So I think that is the Silicon Valley narrative, right? That like consumer AI is kind of a crapshoot. Sure, every now and then you get a Facebook, but most of the time it flops. But I think the idea or the meta or like discussion or vibe in Silicon Valley has shifted a little bit. Mostly basically influenced by ChatGPT, where if you build a strong consumer business, you can get the scale and the diversity to build up like infrastructure and then data and all that. And I think like it seems very powerful, but obviously also subject to a lot of fads. Anyway, I'm not a consumer guy, you can tell. Cool. What other lab is sort of top of mind? Maybe, I guess we're recording this with GPT-5 imminent. That's another big story. You were on TITV talking about it. How has been your coverage of just generally stepping back OpenAI in general, like a very tricky, large, secretive company to cover? What's it like?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. Well, we are hiring specifically an OpenAI writer, so that can tell you like how much work goes into covering that company and the fact that
Yeah, their
we
only job
want
is
to have
OpenAI.
yeah, so we want to have one person that's just like reporting on OpenAI, which is like crazy. I feel like yeah, I can't even think really of past examples of where you'd have a journalist, focus on like one, early stage startup just by itself. But yes, it's a very complicated and somewhat secretive company. And I think especially because like there are so many angles to come at it from, right? Like there's like consumer product, there's enterprise side, there's the work it's doing with the government now and the regulation and laws and policy that it's involved with. And then obviously there's stuff like Stargate and compute and like the crazy data center project that they're working on. Yeah, I mean like really like any angle under the sun, like you can write about it with OpenAI. I think specifically whenever I think about like GPT-5, which we recently wrote a story on, I think like what's so interesting about that to me is that kind of like, the past year we've seen a lot of progress, especially in reasoning models. But I think like under all of that has been the fact that like GPT-4 has been kind of the like leading GPT model for a very long time. And everyone's kind of like, okay, when is something worthy of the GPT-5 name going to come out? Like we saw 4.5, which was like low-key kind of a flop and like I think has actually been deprecated from the API now, which is crazy.
Yes, I'm very sad.
Yes, but like, as much as we see O1, O3 doing super well, like this has been the big question, like what is going on with GPT? And the story that we wrote, we kind of talked about how at least the people that we've talked to who've tested it so far have been pretty impressed. They seem to think that it's been, there's been improvements in a number of domains and both like science and coding, but also areas like creative writing and general knowledge. But I think like the question that we have coming out of this is how, like, what does the performance of GPT-5 say about the trajectory of AI? So if GPT-5 is like a flop for some reason. Like, what does that mean about, like, what does that mean for reasoning models and like the good progress that we've seen there? Like, is O4 also going to be a flop? But then on the flip side, if GPT-5 is good, is that necessarily because pre-training is still going super well and we've been able to scale up pre-training really nicely and everything's going super smoothly? Or is it actually because like reinforcement learning is the area that we're getting the most improvements from now? And like, if that's true, how much further can we go with like reinforcement learning and post-training? So I think like that's going to be the most interesting part coming out of the GPT-5 launch, is kind of not just thinking about like, oh, like what does this mean for OpenAI standing in the AI race, but like literally what does this mean for just like AI progress for every AI lab?
Yeah.
How do you think about poking into the other labs? So, GPT-5 is coming out soon. Are you in parallel trying to see, okay, is Anthropic going to release something? Is Gemini going to release something? Is XAI, Elon always wants to drop things at the same time. What's kind of like the routine?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're always keeping an eye out on like all the labs. And there definitely have been some points where I know like a year or two ago, I think OpenAI like released their like multimodal model like the day before Google released theirs. So there's always like some fun little like drama happening in the background. But I think for the most part, at least, like, and I hope I don't jinx myself. For the most part, I think right now, like GPT-5 is the main model on the horizon for us. I think most of the other labs like have like somewhat recently released models. And so I would expect maybe for it to be like a couple months before they come out with something. But, like we see Anthropic, for instance, like raising a huge round right now. And so I have no idea if that's at all affected by like GPT-5 coming out and them wanting to like really accelerate things because they're like worried, for instance. But yeah, I think depending on how this model goes, like we'll definitely see more models released from some of these other labs, or like them wanting to raise rounds and things like that to like get the next model here faster.
Yeah. I mean, I think third cycle of you ship a big model, get some noise, get some like I said, traction and noise and excitement, and that helps you with the fundraise for the next thing. I'm happy to move on in terms of topics, but obviously OpenAI is very huge. But like, I do think that it's also very interesting when each lab CEO puts out a blog post, because it often tends to lead the fundraise. So I think most directly, for example, Machines of Loving Grace was directly before the $100 billion fundraise for Anthropic. And I think like there's some correlation there in terms of like when Dario shows up somewhere and says like, oh, like a third of the workforce is going away. That's also like a very obvious like I am fundraising sign. And I don't know if like people read the tea leaves like that, or am I being like sort of conspiracy theory.
Yeah. I guess I think about, what was it, the Anthropic memo where they're talking about taking money from like the Middle East. Although I think that one's like pretty obvious. That one's like, okay, definitely something's going on.
That was what was that? Like,
yeah,
they didn't have to say that.
Yeah, that was like very interesting. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like I don't know Dario personally or anything like that, but I think in some ways you gotta respect somebody who's like that open with their employees, for better or for worse, like potentially for worse because it leaked and I think people were like not super happy with them. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting with like AI, there's a lot of these conflicts where it's like, a lot of the companies, for instance, are like are removing from their terms of usage, like you can't use AI for weapons or military. And then sometimes like you kind of hear from them and they're basically just like, well, obviously I don't want our AI to be used to like kill people. But if we take this off, then at least we can like be in the room with like the military or the government and be able to like give them advice and like shape what they're doing. And so, yeah, there's a lot of like weird, like moral conflicts, I think, with these companies and like who they take money from or like who they allow to use their models. That's very tough. But yeah, well, what did you think of the Dario memo? Were you like surprised?
Usually these things, everyone knows like when you put something like this out, it's going to be all over the press. And like, why would you put anything potentially embarrassing? Like you just didn't have to feed your critics. You can just say like, hey, we're looking at the Middle East. You don't have to say like we're compromising our principles or whatever to go into the Middle East. Anyway, yeah, I think more broadly, I don't have a take on that. I think everyone has to sort of find their way. I think Google, has had to deal with the "Don't be evil" a slogan that they had in the early days. And, at some point, like, what does evil mean to you doesn't mean the same thing to me as if I live in a completely different country and context than you. So like, yeah, there's one form of discussion. I think the other thing that happens a lot with big founders, with big CEOs, which I've had like sort of offline conversations. A lot of them like want to build AGI, but like that I approve of, in order to fight the AGI that I don't approve of. So like it's the only thing that can beat a bad AGI is a good AGI, and like, so they rather at least be part of that debate rather than, I guess, not be. So I think that's a very motivational factor.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. I feel like it's a very tech thing to be like I know how to protect us from like the evil tech.
I mean, you have to, like, somebody has to try, and if you don't try, someone else will try.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
then what? So like, you want to be high agency or you're not high agency. And the other thing is like, if you have the ability, then maybe you have the responsibility, not to be too Spider-Man about it.
That's true. That is true.
So yeah, I mean, and then I think the other things about Anthropic are like they made a real dent with on the coding side. Are they going to be a coding oriented lab? They made some movements on financial services and other verticals like maybe defense. But I think coding is obviously a very key battlegrounds. Like we just talked about how GPT-5 is maybe OpenAI sort of pushing back on Cloud Code and Sonnet and Opus. But like, is that a big part of the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely feels like Anthropic has decided that coding is kind of their like battleground. And I mean, so far they've been doing really well. I think like one thing I've heard, and I'd be curious, like, I think like I'm not a developer, obviously, so I'd be curious if this is your opinion as well. But like, I think one thing that developers have told me is that like one reason why they like Claude for coding so much is because it's not only good at kind of like competitive or academic programming tasks, but it's also like these more like soft skill type thing, or not soft skills, but more practical everyday things that they're good at, like working with, huge code bases that have lots of like old legacy code in them, or just even being like persistent with solving a coding problem and realizing like, hey, I've tried X thing like 3 times and it hasn't worked. So like, let me try something different. So it kind of feels like as scientific as like code feels, like it seems like behind the scenes at Anthropic, there's a lot of like, it's like a like more kind of like art than science. Like there's a lot of like shaping of the model that is happening to help with kind of what engineers deal with during their day-to-day versus more like academic, competitive programming questions.
I think the $200 a month for unlimited usage definitely helps people go towards Anthropic with Cloud Max on the Cloud Code. But yeah, the models are definitely very good at that. And I think they have now a great harness to get data to make the models even better. Like in the in Claude Code now, it basically tells you, you can respond and tell Claude what it got wrong if you don't want to do the thing that it says it's going to do. And I think obviously OpenAI wants to get the same type of data with Codex, but I think they're way far behind as far as adoption, at least in our circles. I'm sure they have a lot of usage in other groups, but yeah, the models are good. And one thing, Chroma released this context rod paper recently about context utilization, and the Claude models are actually the best at using kind of like longer context. So I think there's maybe been this question of like, maybe the model is not better at code necessarily. It's like just better using the context and kind of the day-to-day that ends up playing a lot to it. So I think we don't yet know. Like you said, it's kind of like it's better, but like, why is it better? Like, it's unclear necessarily, but the vibes are definitely good.
Yeah, it's like, it's hard to explain in words. I mean, like how upset would you, I mean, I know Anthropic has come out with some new news about like kind of rate limits, but like how upset would you guys be if they like raise the pricing from 200 or like put some pretty intense like usage based pricing on it?
Well, you can pay as you go on top with the API. So at least, I think that's what they're going to test. It's like, okay, how much over do people go with the API as you go pricing? I don't know. I mean, I always said with Cursor, I was always saying this. I was like, I would definitely pay $200 a month for Cursor. Like when it was like $20 a month, it just like, it doesn't make sense that I'm like, cost 20. I don't know what the Claude number will be. I think yeah, 400 I will probably pay.
Okay.
But above that, it's kind of like, okay, I don't know. But maybe once I start using the API as pay as you go on top of it and I realize how much to spend, I'm like, okay, maybe I should still doing it. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I don't know, Sean, what your take is.
Yeah, how much are you willing to pay for
yeah,
Cursor or,
Look, like, I mean, I'll pay as much as I get value out of it. And if, if my job is to produce a lot of code, then, and there's a lot of, there's some top tier thing that is generally not just producing slop, but like actually productively creating code. And then I think, I would definitely pay like thousands a month, right? Like, I was out when they came out with the sort of $200 a month plan for ChatGPT Pro. I forget the actual title, the names of these plans. I was out here saying like we're gonna have 2,000 of them on ChatGPT, right? They're like they just have they like he's just like stuff enough product in there and model value in there, you'll get it. And I mean similarly, I think like Devin is or sort of Cognition's Devin is like in the 500 to 1,000 a month tier, and like I think prices will go up as long as you're using that inference productively. I think specifically for Anthropic and Cloud Code, it's really more about quote unquote the margins, which is the meme I always post now every time there's a sort of Anthropic post about like how their revenue projections have gone like from 4 billion this year to 9 billion because of Cloud Code. And I always post like, what are the margins? Like you guys started talking about top line, but like, if you're all negative margins, then like, it's not that exciting.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah, no, I mean, we had a story yesterday about OpenAI and how, like, I think they've reached about 12 billion ARR. And yeah, but their burn went from like, they projected like 1 billion to like 8 billion or something. So yeah, so like the question is like, your revenue is great, but like, how about those margins? So I think that's very fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, it's going to be the major factors of like compute. Personnel is now an increasingly key one. Data, we have this concept of the four wars of AI, and it's all around like the key battlegrounds that people have. The last one is multimodality. And so, like, I think like there's a lot of like really interesting work there that's being done. That like I think it's like a balancing act. Like you just kind of you need a visionary founder. Successes every, like 2 to 3 times a year, and you just kind of keep the plate spinning while you're growing this thing. But like I really wonder what the sort of quote unquote terminal value, just to use the finance term, of what all these things are.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's especially now that like, I mean, we saw the like boomerang with the Claude Code leads like going to Cursor and then coming back.
Yeah, what was that? Can you double click on it?
To be honest, like I know that we kind of broke that story, but I think your guess is as good as mine. We know that they went there. They were there for I think about 2 weeks and they came back. I think our sense is that it wasn't a situation where it was just about comp, where like Anthropic was just like, oh, we'll like pay you more. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting question. I don't know.
Okay, so for example, you're saying it's not about comp in the sense that like they were poached by Cursor, and then Dario raised this $100 billion, and he turns around and goes like, "Hey, where are my Cloud Code guys?" And they're like, "Screw you, get them back."
I mean, I think. Yeah, my sense is that it wasn't that case. I mean, I'm sure Cursor gave them like a great package, and I'm sure like the package. Yeah, I'm sure we heard some of those numbers, we'd be like, wow, that's awesome. But I mean, like Anthropic like has a lot of money, and like they care a lot about their workers. So I think if it was just about comp, like they could have probably just given them a higher offer if they really wanted to keep them. So I think there is something else going on. I don't know if it's like culture or just like how interesting the work is. Something that must have brought them back to Anthropic, I think.
Margins, like this, the other thing, right? Like it's very damaging to like for somebody to go in, look at Cursor and go, yeah, I'm not sticking around, and then they leave, right? Like, so yeah, I think to be super clear to anyone listening, this is not insider information. This is just these are the things that people say in the Valley, of like how it looks when nobody talks about the actual reason. People just speculate. You did have a nice piece on like the retention curves of these different coding agents up there. That's a big story. We can talk about that. We've kind of segued in from the model labs into the coding agent startups. What was your sort of summary of like the whole windsurf situation? Let's just leave it at that. Summary of windsurf.
Yeah, summary of the windsurf. Yeah, that actually is really funny because that happened like while I was on a boat in the Mediterranean. So I was like, I just came back and I was like, oh my God, like some shit went down while I was gone. No, but I mean, it's very interesting. I think it's another example of these like strange acqui-hire deals that are happening. But like, I think it's interesting, like windsurf, I think got so much more attention and honestly like hate from people in Silicon Valley, people on Twitter, on X, than some of these past deals because of like the structure. And I think how many people were like left behind. And I think there's also this sense of like a lot of these acqui-hires have happened when the startup that's getting acquired is maybe not doing super well, or like it's kind of reached its peak and it's it's on the way down, but it kind of felt like windsurf was like on the up and up, and people were still really excited about them. And maybe they just got a deal that was like too good to turn down. But I think a lot of people were disappointed that like a company that was doing so well would kind of just choose to go like the acquisition route. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like as developers, like, I mean, I'm assuming that you guys would prefer maybe you'd prefer Windsurf to stay in an independent company, so you have more like coding assistants and options to choose from. Maybe that doesn't matter, but yeah.
I think Windsurf as a product is going to stick around, and like people who really like Windsurf, I mean, I was a Windsurf user for a long time. We are going to keep using it because it fills a need, and like obviously Cognition bought it for a reason. Yeah, so no particular thoughts there. I think that the people are mostly in drama about one, the sort of weird, I've been calling this execu hires, basically. Like it's like not quite an echo hire, but like you hire the executives. And then two, like obviously this quote unquote the startup founding engineer employer contract, which was, is calling the question now with what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that is uncertain for me is like, there's been like 5 of these, character, scale, all these. Is this the new normal? Was the Windsurf deal any different? Because somehow the others had a lot less outrage than this one, even though a lot of the sort of surface level details were the same. And like, I mean, I would really love to like talk to one of the lawyers involved in like these things. Like how did they negotiate the deal points? And like technically the entire company is cashed out. So like how do the investors feel about it?
Yeah.
It's all super interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think 2 things. I think first, like talking to investors, I think they're kind of over these types of deals. Like they're like, hey, I mean, like this is like fine, but like we don't invest in companies so they can get like a weird acqui-hire situation a couple years later. Like we're investing in them because we think they can go public, or like, at the very least get bought and like a pretty good exit. So I think a lot of VCs are like not super thrilled with these deals continuing to be like the new norm. But yeah, I think to something that you said earlier, like there's a sense that whenever you join a startup, like you're going to be compensated for the risk that you're taking on of joining like something that's unproven. And then now you're having these situations where like, yeah, some people do get rewarded for taking on that risk, but then other people who have been there for like just as long, or, like feel like they've put in a lot of work, like are getting like seemingly nothing out of the deal. So yeah, I think it's definitely like messing with the trust between startup employees and CEOs and founders for sure.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would sort of put a footnote in there is, I think even in the Windsurf deal, they did get offers at Google, but like, there was some kind of revesting thing going on. Yeah, cool. Any other sort of coding agents commentaries while we're still on the sort of coding topic? Anything else you're watching? How do you cover I guess like coding in general, if you're, out in New York and, we're over here?
Yeah. If I'm not like a developer and I'm like trying to understand what the heck is going on with coding startups.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is just like finding sources and developers that I really trust and like being very straight up with them and being like, hey, I'm not a developer, but like show me a couple examples of things that you built with this. Like tell me your opinions about what they're good for or not good for. I think like one thing I'm interested in is like the rise of some of these like open source coding assistants like Klein, which I know was on your podcast.
Yeah. And they're announcing their A today. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the rise of kind of these like coding assistants targeting non-technical users like Bolt or Lovable, where, yeah, you see a bunch of these startups that have raised a decent chunk of funding that are like, we want to target like either people wanting to make like prototypes of actual apps or just like small businesses that want to make like a website or, something that's not super complex, but like we'll get them up and running. There's also been a lot of stories around like what can go wrong when you're using like vibe coding. Like it can accidentally delete your code. It can like totally not have some security thing that you need in there. And like lots of stuff gets leaked out. And so, yeah, vibe coding is great, but I think we're only just now starting to see some of the consequences of what happens whenever you're not like careful with it.
Yeah, very mixed feelings about all those. Go ahead, Alessio.
On the client thing, I was going to say, sorry, it was just funny that Forbes did an article and used the latent space bot screenshot as their
Nice.
For listeners, the screenshot guy is Alessio. So it's actually kind of cool that like they stole his artwork, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. Anyway, just
I feel like
Uh,
you guys should get a commission for that or something, you know?
it's Forbes. Who cares? I mean, okay. I mean, I'll go there. You know, I don't know if it's offensive or not, but like, look, like
You
Forbes
throwing
and
shade
business.
on the
Fine, you don't work there anymore, but like Forbes and Business Insider like really fell off. Like even like people are saying like TechCrunch really fell off. Like the information is like actually up there. Like we will never have those people on. We'll obviously talk to the information, but like what's going on with like legacy online tech media has like really declined really hard, and like I don't know what's going. You know,
Yeah.
is there chatter on the reporter side?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, media is like a very crazy industry. I mean, as somebody that like still feels pretty new to it, there's just a lot of stuff going on. I think like business model wise, like ads are not working they're not working as well as they used to. I think like the information, like we do well because we have this subscription model, but like still I cannot tell you how many people complain to me because they're like, why is your subscription like literally $500? Like that's insane. And so like, yeah, so like we do it because we need to like stay alive as a business and like I want to get a salary, but like also you're also giving up some like accessibility for people who like want to read our stuff. Although we do have many free newsletters, I'll put that out there. So there's like the business model stuff is like not going super well. And I think a lot of publications are struggling to kind of like find their niche in the way that they've done in the past. So like I think the information, like our whole thing is like scoops and exclusives. But like if you're a company that's more known for like summarizing like the daily news or even like having some sort of opinion or analysis, like now that you people on like X who are doing that, or you can just use like ChatGPT to send you summary of the news every morning, like you're just competing against so many other sources of news. And I don't know, I just feel like in general, like a lot of people just for some reason kind of distrust like media now and are turning to like influencers that they trust or, you know, people on social media, people on X for news because they feel like a personal connection with that person and they like think that they are a trustworthy person. So I think the media is like fighting an uphill battle right now and it's tough. And that's like tech media. So like I think like covering politics like way, way worse.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's out of her domain, but I always think it's fascinating. Just like I hear some really awful stuff at TechCrunch, and I'm like, well, not TechCrunch, you know, like TechCrunch is an institution, you know. Anyway, so okay, there's the two angles I really want to focus in on. I'll start with the first one, which is scoops and exclusives, right? Yeah, you guys are amazing at it. Could you peel back the curtain a little bit on how? You know, obviously, like not the whole like secret sauce or anything, but like like how like what you know how do you get people to talk to you? Like I try to get there a little bit as an amateur, but like also you're really good at it. Like let's face it, like you're really good at it.
Thanks. I mean, I don't know about that, but I don't know. I think everyone kind of has their own approach or like their own like thing that they do. So I feel like I know some reporters who are like super blunt, like very to the point, and they will just like be super persistent and just like call you up, ask you straight about the deal and kind of give off the vibe of like, hey, like I know what I'm talking about and like I'm going to get this information. So like you should help me. I think I know other people that are
That
much
this
more
is
like,
it's Kara Swisher, right?
sorry? Oh, yes,
That I mean
exactly.
that's the Kara Swisher model.
Yes. And then also I know other people who are much more like kind of like disarming or like they say stuff like, oh, like, you know, I think I saw like this like tweet that said this and like, did you hear about that? Like, I don't know. I think for me, like I cannot be like scary or aggressive. Like I unfortunately just don't have that gene, which I wish that I did have it. So I feel like my thing is mostly just to be like, try to be like super curious and like talk about my newsletter where I do cover things that are not scoops and be like, hey, like I love a good scoop as much as anyone else, but like I also care about the tech and the science. So like, let's just like start there and talk about that. So I think like, you need to kind of figure out like what works best for your style and like who you are as a person, but then also think about, oh, the person you're talking to. If I'm talking to a researcher, maybe I don't want to just come out and be like, oh my God, is like so and so buying so and so, but just start with more like, hey, tell me about your research and like, I'm just curious about it. Versus like if you're like talking to a VC, it might be more transactional where you're like, hey, I heard about these 5 deals. Have you heard about them? Like, hopefully I'm helping you. So can you help me out too? So it's just a lot of different approaches. I think also it's just like not being embarrassed about your job and just like literally like I will just cold call people I've never talked to and just be like, hello, like, I know you don't know who I am, but like, please tell me this piece of information. And like, sometimes like you accidentally call their mom instead of them, or you like get yelled at on the phone, and then you just have to be like, okay, like that's just the way it is. And like, it's just my job and I'll just move on. So there's a bit of kind of like just accepting the fact that this is your job and like not caring if sometimes people are like, what is this annoying journalist doing calling me?
I'm surprised you actually cold call. Like I will never pick up a cold call.
I know, yeah. No, something that I feel like, especially like millennials and Gen Z, like we hate calling people. So that
Yeah.
was like low key something that I had to get over because I was like, I used to hate calling people, and I was like, I'll just text them and like maybe
Wow.
they'll like get back to me. But no, you're just like
Okay.
aggressively calling people all the time now.
I have a new respect for your work. Yeah, well, also like, do you have to like, how do you protect sources so people trust you and like they can get fired for if we're like telling you things they're not supposed to tell you?
Yeah.
Do you just like reword things? You get a second source. You say many people close to the matter. Like what are the techniques here?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like protecting my source is like my number one priority. Like there are times where I hold off on a story or, I let people, and maybe somebody tells me something and then they're like, actually, like, I'm really worried. I don't want you to write about that anymore. I'm like, it's okay. Like, this is not that big of a deal. Like I've done stuff like that because like I care about my sources and like them obviously not getting in trouble or getting fired. But yeah, there's lots of stuff that you can do. Like I think we always try to get like multiple sources on facts, or obviously like I think we have a responsibility to our readers and like we want them to trust us, so we try to tell them as much as we can about like how our source knows this information. So if like they were in a meeting or if they saw like a document, so we try not to use stuff like, oh, like a person familiar with XYZ, because that's like quite vague. You don't really know like what that means, but we still do try to give some information, but like keep it as broad as possible. So like instead of saying investor, we might say like a person who's talked to the executives, or instead of saying like a person that worked on this team specifically, you might say like a person with knowledge of this product, or like a person, or like an employee at this company. So it's like all this stuff that you can do. And I think it's just like building trust with your source over time. And like, like I want them to trust me because I want this to be a long-term relationship. So like, even if we just talk completely off the record the first like 10 times, like that's totally fine. Like I'm in it for the long run. So I just don't want them to ever feel like uncomfortable or like they're putting their job at risk because of me.
Totally. I mean, we do the same for people that talk to me and Alessio. Yeah. So obviously, anyone listening, if you have stuff for Stephanie, I'm sure she's easy to reach. A lot of people seem to use Signal or Telegram. I mean, I don't think it's that encrypted, or but like, yeah, that's a tool of your trade, right?
Yes.
I think the other thing for readers, I think is also like a cool like peek behind the curtain of like how these things get formed. I don't know if you want to say anything to readers on like sort of how to read the tea leaves on the stuff that you do, but like, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to think that we're like pretty straightforward. Like I think we are like pretty like straightforward and to the point with our writing, and
You are.
try to like
I really
break things
appreciate that.
down as much as possible. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's like I remember whenever I first started covering AI here, like trying to think about how to explain like model weights and like a I was like, this is like impossible. But yeah, I think for readers, like I think one thing that we in every media publication can always do better at is like taking a step back from the individual scoops and understanding like what this all means more broadly. And so we try to write about that in our newsletters on like our TITV. But a lot of the times I think it's like really easy to get caught up in like, oh, this model developer raised, like this inference provider raised. And it's like very hard to kind of think about, okay, like what does this all mean? Or like what does it mean that 5 inference providers raised in the last like 3 months or something? So I think whenever you're reading, just keep that in mind. And we will like link to related stories all the time. So like definitely let yourself go down that rabbit hole of like, understanding how this story isn't just a story or a scoop on its own. It's connected to like this long narrative of like the progress of AI over the past couple years. And just try to think about like, what does this mean in this like broader story that we're trying to tell here? And so obviously we want to do that for you as much as we can, but I think that's also just a way to think about reading these scoops that will hopefully like help you understand more what's going on in the broader context of the tech world than just like a single story.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people. The way to elevate the conversation instead of just repeating what you just saw on Twitter is to tie it into a broader trend, to have an understanding of why now, understanding of like the economic forces at play, the agendas of different players. And so a lot of what I do is just trying to read into that. Honestly, like I have a little chip on my shoulder. As I don't think we do it that well, but I'm kind of curious. Do you guys maintain a list of trends we are tracking, databases of stuff? But like I almost feel like I can't keep up of how many kind of theses I'm tracking in my head, because it all comes through conversations, and conversations, like in a single conversation you can have like 20 different things that you touch on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, that's like the hardest thing I think sometimes. Like, I think there's some like just organizational things that you can do. Like, we have like weekly meetings about AI or like deals that we're chasing. And so I think some of that also rests on our editors because they're not kind of like in the weeds chasing down stories all the time. Like, they're better at like, okay, here are like the 5 trends that we're thinking of writing stories about. And like, I'm going to assign this one to you, Stephanie. And like, let's talk about this every week. So yeah, and I think there's like, I mean, there's like, this is obvious with stuff I do. Like, I have like a notepad of like all the major trends that I'm chasing, and so at any point, I kind of like know what the top 5 like priorities are for myself. So I think it's just understanding like you can't remember all 30 trends and tips that are going on, but like just keep in mind the top 5 maybe that you're thinking about, and think about how tips and information that you hear can tie into those.
I was hoping you have some magical AI tool that I can, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's like journalist AI. Well, if somebody wants to make an AI startup for that, that would be great. Although I don't know if like journalist is a very lucrative market for companies to go after, but I would love a
Well,
tool.
I mean, yeah, like meeting note taking, like you say that you're in meetings all day. I mean, that's a huge market. It's basically granola and Notion. And I think there's a long tail of others. There's a Grip Tape, which I think is journalist focused, which is kind of
Mm,
cool. That they're a bootstrap company. But like, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I think people want to get on top of their personal knowledge management. They want to build their second brain. I was a big part of that movement before AI stuff. Like, yeah, and then more broadly, thematic wise, it's literally like, again, like going back to like finance days, like that's what I did as a hedge fund analyst. I would track like portfolio themes, and like here's all the the trends that the news items that are coming in that change our bullishness or bearishness on a theme, and like then you have to express that in your portfolio through the stocks that you make. But like my portfolio or your portfolio here is your coverage. Right. Like, and like every guest we pick is a guest that, takes a slot for a guest that we do not pick
mm.
because we want to emphasize this theme. For us, like we tend to emphasize engineers and coding. And so our lanes are relatively well defined, but like yours are very wide.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. Well, how do you choose to cover smaller startups, right? Like a lot of people want to get on and be covered by the information. Sometimes you cover, a lot of it's like the big labs and of course like huge amounts of money, but like occasionally you cover like Vercel, and today you're covering Modal. Like how do you choose the smaller startup coverage? When should they reach out to you?
Yeah. No, it's funny about Modal that it's like the world has gotten so crazy now that like $1 billion startup, we're like, oh, it's like a baby. But
Like, oh, that's cute. But New York tech. Aha.
true, true.
Right?
Yeah, that was the key because
The
I
New
love New York.
Yorkers
I
are
love
like
New
finally like
York.
not just
uh,
Datadog and MongoDB.
exactly, exactly. No, but I mean, like, yeah, like, I mean, just reach out to me, and I'm even if I don't cover. Okay, so actually, let me take a step back. I think if you want to get coverage, part of it is like understanding that like it's a long game. You might not get coverage right now, but like I might not have the room in the newsletter to cover your funding round right now, but like I'm always looking to meet new startups, and like hopefully we can find a way to do coverage or have some sort of story that's around your startup later. So I think don't just like come in and be like, hi, we've never met, but like I need you to cover my like $3 million seed round or something. But I think also like another way to pitch to like talk to me and pitch to me is like, again, what I just mentioned about taking that step back. And so like, even if I don't cover smaller startups like standalone, like for instance, this week I did a story about kind of the next step in data labeling and data curation, which are like these startups building like RL environments for agents. And so I listed out like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 startups that are doing that. And these are some that like haven't even like really raised funding. They're like just pretty small. And one of the startups I talked to, like we had like a really great conversation, and I included a lot of information about like their company in the story because like they were just super helpful and like clearly very like well educated on the space. And so I think if you're like a startup and you're like, hey, I think like my space is really interesting and like people aren't really understanding like why this is important, like don't think about just pitching your startup to me, but like pitch me on like why your entire space is important. And like I will write something, like it's more likely that I'll write something about a trend or like a new industry.
Yeah. And by the way, I actually had to drop for an in-person meeting, but I figured this conversation was great, so I just want to keep it going. Yeah, so that's great. I think I wanted to get that on the record because like I think people want to work with you, but like on and they just don't know how. And sometimes like people want to work with us, and the worst thing is they get a PR firm that like barely knows us, spells my name wrong, and like like gets in touch
Yeah.
with me with like a story that is like completely not a story, and like they know it, I know it, like this is just a formality, they're just getting paid to send the email. Like it's so routine, and I think people want to know how to break through the noise and come to you with the good stuff, because a lot of people are working on good stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, like, don't like just send me like an email. Like, don't have like a PR team send me like a really generic email and like just totally get your company wrong. I think it's like better if it comes from you personally, and like I'll appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, I'll even say like for the early stage startup founders listening, I think most of your PR teams are kind of pointless unless you really want to get on like CNBC. Most of us are like easily reachable, we screen tons of requests and it's fine. Like it's like you're probably much better at pitching your own company than the PR team, and we make a decision like really quickly. Like it's not that complicated. Cool. Like yeah. So more broadly, any other sort of coverage areas or themes that are sort of big hits that you're that you want to talk about? Like I don't get a sense of like what your biggest hit is, or like your general sort of thematic overview, if that makes sense. There's like robots, there's
True.
XAI, there's perplexity, there's all these other things. What stands out to you as something that you really want to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess two things. Well, I think first, like, the first thing is like, I think this is what I'm most interested in, but I did kind of touch on it with like our conversation about GPT-5, but just like the trajectory of AI progress and kind of like, first there was like pre-training scaling, and then now there's like reasoning models and reinforcement learning. Then like what comes after that? Like, is it RL environments for agents? Is it something that's different than the transformer? Like, I think we're always curious, just like what is coming next. And I think that's why I love to talk to more people at the big AI labs, because I feel like they're really on the forefront of that.
They can't
I
tell
think
you. That's like a national secret.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, I think a lot of times it's like, I'm not even trying to get like a scoop. Like I'm just like, as a person living in the
You're
world of
personally curious.
AI,
Yeah.
it's like, what do I need to be like excited about? And like, what do I need to be worried about? Like I'm just like genuinely curious, not as a journalist, but again, like as a human being living in today's world. I think like, I mean, this is not a topic that I would like necessarily write about, because like our audience is like business focused, but like, yeah, I think the societal impacts of AI is like fascinating. Like, I mean, I have a younger sibling who's going to college right now and like, like has no idea like what they should
Is he
major
worried?
in or like what job they should have, because like everything's just so up in the air. And like I have friends who are working in like investment banking who are being asked to test like financial modeling software that could one day like replace their jobs. And that's without even getting into the whole like AI boyfriend girlfriends, like people on Twitter going crazy because like the AI is supporting their like manic episodes. And just like, yeah, like there's just so much like we're shaping the AI, the AI shaping us in society. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, and I think sometimes like you hear some of the CEOs say stuff like Mark from Meta made a comment where he was like on average today people have like, I don't know what it was, like 4 friends, but we really have demand for like 12, which is just like such a crazy statement to say.
I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't read that. Okay.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
it's kind of like, yeah, it's like this back and forth between technology and society. And I'm just like very curious, like what the average college student is going to look like 10 years from now, or like what my job is going to be like 10 years from now, and how I'm
Hmm.
going to like how my friendships and, work relationships and stuff are going to work. So
I have a lazy joke, but it's not really a joke. Like, everyone imagines that everyone else's job is going away, but theirs, right? So Mark and Jason's like, like everyone's job is at risk, but VCs will be fine. DoorCash is like podcasting will be fine. So like, yeah, I mean, I think that's a lazy throwaway joke. I think the more serious take is like, I think AI and just technology in general accelerates the difference between the haves and have-nots. And so there's like relatively recent college grads that are now getting the $100 million offers from Meta. And there's also like, I think something crazy like 20-30% unemployment from fresh college grads for like people who don't meet that bar. And so like, I think it's just going to exaggerate inequalities. That's why people talk about things like universal basic income, some amount of like, sometimes like human society is just not made to adjust this quickly, and things have been accelerating, and like our systems just don't adjust that quickly. Like we have like annual schedules, but these things ship like 2-3 major models a year. And like, yeah, like, I do think like at some point, like the autonomy of knowledge work, automation of knowledge work, I think really starts to hit the GDP and society, and like I think that's really scary.
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole joke of like, instead of being like, oh, like I'm related to the Vanderbilt family, kids in the future are going to be like, oh my God, my great great grandpa was like like a founding researcher at Meta Superintelligence Labs or something, and like that's going to be the new like status of being part of the elite, which
This
is
is
like kind of scary.
I traffic a lot of memes, so this is like literally the daddy. What did we do to get so rich? And they were like, your dad took like the meta offer. Well,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, like, so I mean, and my positive spin on this is that we used to freak out about kids wanting to grow up to be YouTube stars and TikTok stars. Now they want to aspire to be ML researchers. Maybe it's not a bad thing. If you want to do more STEM, it's not a bad thing. So maybe they'll be that. Well, I mean, I think coming back to like the sort of more technical stuff, because that's the sort of meat and potatoes of what we do. I think most people that I talk to are not seriously pursuing alternative architectures. There are some notable exceptions, primarily Together with the Mumbart architecture, Recursal with RWKV. There's like the XLSTM that was created by Seth Hawkwriter. And so like there are alternatives, but mostly people are happy scaling it up. And sometimes this is what we call the lottery ticket hypothesis. It doesn't matter what the global best is, as long as like everyone's optimized for one architecture, it's fine.
Okay.
It's kind of like English isn't the perfect language, but it's good enough. Like, and everyone speaks
Yeah.
it. Like, it's got its quirks, but like we did try to design the perfect language. It's called Esperanto, and nobody speaks it.
Yeah.
So like that transformer as the lingua franca, I think like makes sense to me. And now like people are just like scaling up data and like other and techniques. I'm curious if you're the fifth person this week to talk about reinforcement learning environments. Is that just like a theme? Like apparently there are like 10 startups all doing this, and like applied compute is like the hypey one. It's like 3 kids in a basement worth $500 million or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel similar to you. This was like me last week. I was like, oh my God, why have like 4 people brought up this like idea to me?
Okay.
I like need to do like a newsletter on it. But yeah, I think it's like this idea where it's kind of like, why, like, let's just like let agents and models like roam free in this like escape room copy of whatever app, and let it figure out for itself like how to like, put a lead into Salesforce or like do these different things. And yeah, I think it's like this idea of like having less human involvement in reinforcement learning, and getting it to be more automated. But I mean, from what I've heard, it seems like still pretty early, and like I think people are still trying to figure out like how to actually get it working super well.
So are you saying, when you say it's still pretty early, like I expect this to work? I expect this to work immediately. Like is it not working?
No, I think it is working, but like I think it's just very compute intensive to have like an AI agent like taking a bunch of like actions in like this environment, and like a lot of them like don't work out, some of them do. So I think it's like quite expensive. And at least the way somebody explained it to me is like, if I want to make like a copy of Salesforce to teach an agent how to like navigate it, like it's not easy to just create like a copy of Salesforce. There's like a lot of different like buttons and like different databases it connects to. And like, yeah, I think it's just complicated to make it a realistic environment for the model to play around in. But I agree. I think it's like really interesting and very promising. And at least the startups that I talked to, a decent chunk of them are already starting to work with like the big AI labs. And like these are quite early startups. So it seems like the AI labs are very excited about this approach.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would say I hear the same thing. Cool. Thank you so much for taking the time. Any other parting thoughts, questions, call to actions?
no, I mean, this has been super fun. And yeah, I would just say for all your listeners, like I am always open to chatting, even completely off the record. And yeah, I don't know. I just like find AI to be like fascinating and I love talking to people about it. So please email or text me and I would love to chat.
Yeah. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll chat again.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks.